let's look at the textile industry in Nigeria. That industry used to be the largest employer in the country many years ago. Before 1997, Nigeria had the second largest textile industry after Egypt, but so many things had gone wrong with the textile industry in Nigeria, even as the market for textile materials in Nigeria has grown more than ever. They now use fabrics made in different textile industries and now used for different purposes. We've seen the event industry grow in Nigeria, making more demand for textile materials. People use textile materials to identify with families, identify with associations and celebrations, and so the market for textile materials has never been as big as it is right now in Nigeria and even in Africa. The sad part is, at a time when the textile industry in Nigeria would have benefited much from this market that is worth billions of dollars, the textile industry doesn't contribute so much as it should for the demand. We'll talk about that as I take the conversation over now to my gentlemen in the studio, Dr. Idahosa Osamhanze and David Chiedu, who are my fellow anchors on the front burners. Now, looking at the textile industry, before now we had several prints being designed by industries, by companies in Nigeria. So when you see some of them be produced, at the tip of the material you could see made in Nigeria for some of the materials. You could see different things. But right now, many of those materials, many of those prints are designed outside of Nigeria and they are brought into the country. So we are buying, but the companies that are benefiting from this are outside of Nigeria.
Well, I think when we take a look at the textile industry in Nigeria and how we have gone from grace to grass, I will want to put it, is quite very, very saddening. We grew up to see textiles from the North Kaduna, from Lagos, everywhere around here, and all of a sudden they are no longer in business. And this is not just about textile alone. And what's responsible? It is the weakness of our research abilities. Because when you hear people who are playing in that sector comes in and they talk about a lot of things coming in from China, they were all coming in very cheap. And especially when economy are stressed, given the distress we had from the 70s, that led to the structural adjustment program in the 80s. And then, of course, the nosediving of the economy. People will sure be preferring things that are cheaper. And this is one area that we see advantage. Just like Ojeka was saying that day about the mining industry, that as soon as we industrialize, there were no serious investment in that industry. I like with what Bangladesh is doing with their textile. Almost every university in Bangladesh has a degree course as sort of textile engineering, garment making, and all manners of courses. And that is what is actually empowering that industry in Bangladesh. That you find in 2023 alone, Bangladesh made from garments alone 45 billion US dollars. From garments alone. From Europe, from America, and from Asia. How come we are not able to do that? And that's the way we deal with business. And I think that culture of saving and investment, financial literacy, need to be really taught in Africa, because it's also important that if an industry is doing well today, it does not mean that that industry will continue to do well. And there must be a need to invest in research to see how to progress that industry so that it can continue to generate profits. But once we build a structure, we allow it to rot away, and nobody puts in energy into maintenance, no plowback profits into the operations, and then you see that within a short space of time, you become obsolete and you are run out of business. And I think that is what has happened to the textile industry in Nigeria, because there have not been investment in terms of even the yarns that come from the farm, that people are investing and putting new technology in producing it, because it was too tedious a job for people to handle. And when we see that, what do we do? Our school system around this neighborhood should have been investing in research to see how we can make the job simpler, easier, that people can remain interested in it. So these are the challenges that the industry has faced, and I don't think it's just textile alone. It is global to everything. We used to produce Pigeon here. Where are they? They're gone. We used to produce Volkswagen. Where are they? They've gone. They all died because cheaper technology came and we're running on the obsolete. That has happened to our refineries and so many other sectors in the Nigerian economy. So it's a shame that we couldn't really sustain that progress we made earlier on. And that today you find that people doing at the red, they're doing it at the local environment. There's no investment in it. There's not even a deliberate effort to even promote that, just like the Ghanaians are doing with their kente, and they're selling it all across the globe. And I think this is a weakness in the system that really has affected that sector.
Doc, you've raised very key points. No investment in the sector. It's like when the sector is booming, people are just reaping the gains without thinking of plowing back some of the gains as seeds for the industry to become bigger. David?
This is indeed a harrowing situation. And for me personally, it's quite disturbing because, as you said, it was rather, a very thriving industry, very, very thriving industry. But over the years, we've seen it, nosedive to very, very appalling levels. Matter of fact, back in the 70s, we were the largest, or rather, that industry was the largest in the country, as it were. But a lot of things have happened over the years. As far as is concerned, as far as investment in the sector is concerned, there's been a weakness of will to do that, and I don't know why that is. But for some reason, we seem to forget that there is also the cultural connotation or the cultural, implications, because it would, in the long run, erode certain, cultural identities and all of that. Doctor just mentioned Adire. There is also the Ashoke. There is also the one we watched just a moment ago, the Ankara, and then I think there's Batik, if I'm not mistaken. So all of these things put together, you can see them on people and almost immediately identify where they are from. You can see them on people and almost immediately identify who they are. But do we see that anymore? The answer is a very hard no. And another aspect of this are the implications, because if you talk about, these people not having a thriving environment with which they can conduct their businesses, because there have been certain concerns or lamentations in certain quarters that the practitioners or the traders or the dealers in these textile materials, our local textile materials, have been robbed in some regard. And what I mean is they've been deprived of an enabling environment, if you like, to ply their trade. Concerns about people taking the materials outside, concerns of foreigners coming in here and selling the materials at very knockoff prices, thereby denying them the opportunity, if you like, to make sales. and make profits, right? Because it's one thing to make sales, it's another thing to make profits from said sales. So there have been those issues, lingering over and over again, and concerns have been made to, or if you like, complaints have been made to folks on the corridors of power, both at the state level and otherwise. And very little has been done. I mean, I don't want to mention the state, but the practitioners it's in the Southwest, by the way, practitioners went there, complained to, their state governors and even their traditional rulers to do something about it. But up until this moment, nothing has been done. I mean, we could clap our hands for the Ogun State government or clap our hands for the Osun State government, who in some regard gave a bit of, good news by instructing their workers to come to work on a certain day with Ankara and the others with Adire and all of that. While you might say that is one way to go about changing the narrative, it's still not enough. But I'm also going to need, because this is solutions right now, I'm also going to need the Nigerian Textile Manufacturers Association to not just sit still, or rather to not just complain and sit still. I'm going to need them to do much more than complaining. I'm going to need them to do much more than lamenting, because we do a lot of lamentations in this part of the world. So and so is lamenting the this, so and so is lamenting the that. I'm going to need them to go one more than just lamentations. Work with, or rather partner with international textile companies to see that something happens. Of course, there might be some extenuating factors, but of course, if you make your voice loud enough, don't just say it the one time and keep quiet. Because we know that the cotton processing and cotton, if you like, production around here isn't much to go by, isn't anything, if you want to put it that way, to go by. So there's more that needs to be done in that regard. Then, of course, what I mentioned a moment ago, which is textile smuggling. A lot of people take these things outside the shores of the country to, make gains for themselves. I don't know what regulatory framework there is to prevent this from happening as yet, but what I'm simply expecting the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria to do is to strap their boots pretty tightly and get up with regards to, what their practitioners or what the people working in that sector should be able to gain as far as textile marketing, textile production, and the entire overarching practice of textile in Nigeria. There are also some implications. There are, because if you deny people of their livelihood, the local practitioners, as Dr. mentioned, the ones at the grassroots, if they cannot, practice what they know, or sell these things or sell these materials and make profit to be able to keep the lights on or feed their families, as it were, what that happens is, it leads to some shady practices, because if people can't feed themselves, they take to other means that are, outside the shores of the law. Then, of course, it prevents revenue from coming into the local economy. Once upon a time, it used to contribute largely to the GDP of the country. But in the last couple of years, we've seen it dwindle between 1 and 1.5% contribution to the GDP, which is abysmally poor. So a lot needs to be done by way of partnerships with foreign textile companies. Doctor mentioned Bangladesh. There's China, there is Vietnam, there is Turkey, there's Germany. There's a lot of these countries that we can go to who are thriving. In fact, China has the largest market for textile export in the world. And China they are our neighbors as far as bilateral trade is concerned. So these are the things that needs to be done. That's why I need the textile manufacturers and the likes to be up and doing.
Okay, so because of our vibrant fashion industry, there are demands for different types of textile fabrics, and some of these fabrics are not made in Nigeria. For instance, the lace that is very expensive or considered a very expensive fabric in Nigeria, that when people want to have weddings or certain kinds of ceremonies, they don't even go for the Ankara. Some go for lace, and they think that's very expensive. So when you wear that, you look very expensive in it. Many of these are not even produced in Nigeria. Austria is like the leading country producing lace fabrics for Nigeria. If you go to those countries that have made or seen a market for those kind of fabrics and make more of it, exports to Nigeria, they don't really have local demand for that. But they saw a market in Nigeria and developed an industry that caters to that market. We who are the consumers or use that to identify ourselves, because when we wear that, we want to think that we are looking African, even if the fabrics are not from Africa. But we make styles that have become, over the years, symbols of Africa. If you see someone adorned in fabrics like you can see on the screen, you would just think that this person is an African because they are made in styles that we have, over the years, designed and used to represent or used to identify ourselves. The question is, what has stopped us from developing the industry to cater for the markets that we have? If we talk about cotton not being in supply as we used to have over the years, is it that our lands are no longer fertile for the growing of cotton seeds?
No, they are.
We do have lands that are still fertile. It comes back to the laziness. It comes back to maybe ease, assumed ease of, let's not even bother with it. We can get this from the neighboring countries, so let's just import. And over the years, the production of these raw materials begin to drop, and it becomes a problem for the local manufacturers to have access to these materials cheaply. Now, for technology changes, and it's expected that for every industry, as technology changes, you move up to the new type of technology that is being used. But we have not seen that done. Some of the textile companies have long folded up, and they are now being used for something else. The properties are now being used for something else. For those who are still running, it's a struggle because already foreign components in the industry is much. So they are merely struggling to catch up. We've heard the stories of fake Ankara products being imported, fake tie and dye materials being imported, even when the originals of these things are done in Nigeria. But because the dealers of these fabrics are importing all sorts, so together they are importing counterfeits of this and introducing to the market as new designs, new patterns, which those in the fashion industry are buying into, which consumers are also buying into and saying, oh, this is a different pattern, this is a design. For the ashoke, for instance, when you see the ashoke made in Abeokuta, in terms of the texture of the material, it's different from the ashoke that comes from China and other areas. One thing you use to identify is lighter. That looks like a different thing. It doesn't really look like ashoke except for the design. But you still find that sometimes, because we have now been so used to these foreign fabrics, it seems like we have developed a taste for it, and there's some preference for these materials that are even counterfeit to the original being developed. So I think that the consumers still have their role, governments have their role, and those players in the industry have their role. We've all contributed to the decline in the textile industry in Nigeria.
You see, Blessing, there's no human being on earth who wants to go through rigor of suffering. In short, one of the reasons why our father made a whole lot of effort to send us to school was that he didn't want us to come back to the farm because it was really tedious. From the brushing of the bush, to the burning, to the packing, to the digging and planting, to staking, to tendering, to harvesting. My. It's not something you want to do. That was how he inherited it from his father. That's how the father inherited it from his own great-grandfather. That's how he continued it. That's how it's passed on to us. That's why I'm quite passionate about functional education in Nigeria. Farming cotton is a horrible farm to be done manually. So the soil may be fertile, but the labor involved is strenuous. And that's one thing that Africans have not been able to do, to look out for new technology, to simplify, tedious job so that people can do it with less of stress. And that's what you are seeing happening elsewhere. And I think that's what Naseni should have been even focusing on. How to create small tractors that we can use to reduce the stress, human stress, in terms of those cultivation. In short, I think it was Bill Gates who says that he preferred to hire lazy people than hardworking people. Because lazy people will always look for a shortcut out of every problem. And that shortcut is always a new technology. And I think that is where we are missing. How can we sync our institutions of learning with our cultural practices, even in terms of transmission from one generation to another? Tie and dye should be a curriculum, especially in the Southwest, that should be taught from primary to tertiary level, where we are creative with designs and are looking at new ways to make this thing real appealing and not the same old ritual. So that failure in education is actually the problem. If we have an educational system that is forward-looking, that when people go in, for example, to go and study mechanical engineering, and they cannot even repair an engine, let alone build a new one. And yet we have certificates that we are graduates. That's not working. We should study things around us. The last time I went to my village, there was no palm wine. Because all the old men that tap it, they are gone. The younger generation don't even know how to tap. Healthy drink for that matter. But we are losing it. Why? Because we cannot perpetuate things because of the tediousness. Because to climb that palm tree with rope, it's risky and dangerous. And we are not finding solution to make this simpler by way of even just common small crane. Today we are still using what they call it, poles and bamboos to climb 24-story building.
For construction.
For construction. Whereas you get to UAE, there are manually operated small cranes that will carry somebody from ground up, even if it's a 30-story building. And I think that is what we should be doing in Africa, finding solution to the problem around us. And this is why the industries are dying. Because we are not creative. We are not innovative. We do it the same it was, like we say in my Orthodox background, as it was in the beginning, so it is, and so it shall be, world without end. Amen. And I think life should be like that.
And several other countries have made a lot of money from Nigeria because they have now become suppliers to the Nigerian textile markets, and they're making a lot of money. So it's for us now to sit and say, okay, this is what we want to do. But where I will also bring in the government, because if you do not act as the body that coordinates and you leave it to the private sector, people will just do things interconnectedly and rather in a way that does not connect. So you may have the textile dealers, those who deal on textile materials, just look for a place where they can source and make more profit. They are sourcing from there. Those who are making use of the material will also look for who supplies to them at the time they need and based on the kind of clients that they have. But when you have the government come in, so it says, for instance, we want to revive the textile industry. We're concentrating on the raw materials. Who are the farmers of cotton here? How do we channel materials to them, tools to them to make their farming easy? And so for other things that they need, if it's power, how do we ensure that maybe there's a hub, industrial hub, where they have access to power? And then for those who deal on the materials, how do we ensure that they have maybe a list of suppliers or from different parts of the country so that they always have supply, and then that value chain is built for the industry to thrive?
Like I said earlier, I'm still going to harp on what the association can and must do if the textile industry is going to be revived, because since the Second Republic till date, there's been 150 of such industries such outfits rather in the industry shut down since the 70s till date. So there has to be a systemic approach to dealing with these matters. You've talked about creating systems that would cause fluidity, if you like, in the value chain. And I will go one more and say, listen, there is the association, there is the government who is supposed to invest heavily in this sector, then there are private individuals who simply want to put their money in an area or a sector where they are going to get value. So you put all of these together and then you ask what the investor or investors are looking for. Do they really see any value in the sector? If the answer is no, I don't think there's anyone, even one with half a brain, that would want to do that. So that then falls on the desk of the federal government with regards to taking a critical look at each sector of the economy, this one not being excluded. So the moment they decide to, but first of all, there has to be a willpower, or be not the willpower, beg your pardon, there has to be the political will. The moment they decide that they want to revamp the textile industry in Nigeria, it's as simple as calling all the stakeholders involved and then hatching out a plan. First of all, make sure that the requisite infrastructure is provided. Whatever it is that the average industry in Nigeria needs to function, regardless of what industry it is, right? In whatever sector. Make sure that those things are provided, make sure that those things are put in place, and then you provide a regulatory framework so that you don't have to be actively involved in the quote-unquote day-to-day. You put those measures in place or put those systems in place, take a step back and just, perform oversight functions, and then let the private individuals put their money in the system, and you'd see how there will be a transformation overnight. Listen, there is no insignificant sector as far as the Nigerian economy is concerned. There just hasn't been any seriousness. There just hasn't been any responsibility. There just hasn't been the much needed political will to make sure that these things are set in motion, to make sure that the oiling, if you like, of these wheels are put so that they can turn seamlessly, so that they can turn, productively, as the case may be. Circling back to what Doctor said earlier about, incorporating these into our curriculum, I would say that there has been a dearth of capacity. There has been a stark lack of capacity in that regard. And you want to add to that enthusiasm or interest, because the average young person these days, and I'm not trying to single out any subset, they would rather wear what is in vogue outside the shores of the country. And if you tell them, oh, can you do this thing, can you go into this business, and my guess rather is that their answer would most likely be a no, because they don't consider it as something that they should be doing or that they should find themselves doing. So it's a lot of sensitization that needs to go on, and a lot of capacity that needs to be built in this regard. The local farmers, it shouldn't end at the local farmers. It should be, it should climb cadres, and there should be some upskilling of other players, or if you like, stakeholders in the sector, so that the moment we have enough capacity, you'd see that things that needs to be done as far as the industry coming alive will be done.
Well, we do hope that what is needed to give the textile industry a boost will happen, because the demand for textile fabrics is very high in Nigeria due to the vibrant nature of the fashion industry in Nigeria. We'll have the conversation here when there are updates as regards what the government is doing or the players in the industry are doing to ensure that that industry does not die, or we do not give over the market completely to foreign countries. We'll bring you that update. Let's take a break and return to the time for us to talk about marriage and divorce. It seems like the president of the US is not done making reforms to different sectors in the US.